Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening and taking the time to learn about the ways our legislative districts will be redrawn this year. My name is Tina Pollock, and I'm here representing the League of Women Voters of Michigan. We would like to thank the Holland Museum for partnering with us in this town hall. The League is a nonpartisan organization that encouraged informed and active participation of citizens in government. You might be familiar with our efforts to educate voters through our nonpartisan voter guides and candidate forums. We do take positions on issues after studying them. We started in 1920 as an outgrowth of the suffragist movement. We are in all 50 states, and we have 27 local leagues in Michigan. Membership is open to anyone 16 years and older. The League also works to increase understanding of major public policy issues through education. This presentation is part of that effort. I will be covering the redistricting process itself, and Lena Del Real, our membership director, will be talking about communities of interest. As a reminder, please remember to stay muted yourself during the presentation. We ask that you put written questions into the chat, and we will answer them at the end of the presentations. Right now, we are pleased to have with us Edward Woods III, who is the Communications Director and Outreach Director of the Michigan Independent Citizens Commission. And he will speak to us about the work of the commission before we start our presentation. Mr. Woods. Unmute.
Thank you so much, Tina. Edward is
Okay.
fine. I'm happy to be here. I am from the southwest part of the state, grew up in Berrien Springs, Michigan, and one of our field trips was always going to Dutch Village. So this is nice just to come back and be on the west side of the state. I live in Lansing, but just happy. When they said Holland, I'm like, I know Holland. I wouldn't mind going to Holland virtually. And so thank you for having me. I can provide this presentation. We're ready to go.
Sure.
And now for me, do you want me to take questions after my presentation? Would that be all right or no?
Yes,
Okay.
That'll be fine.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Edward Woods III. I serve as the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission Communications and Outreach Director. We say MICRC for short. I know you hate government acronyms, but I love League of Women Voters, and I know what LWV means. So hopefully people will know what MICRC means as well. I just want to commend the Holland chapter, as well as the League of Women Voters across the state for the outstanding partnership in getting the word out about the redistricting process. We are very fortunate to have the League as a partner, and I know our commissioners feel the same. Believe it or not, we are doing 4 presentations at this time. 4. One is taking place in Holland, another one's in Grosse Pointe, another one is in Dearborn, and another one is in Alpena. And so I just want you to know we are committed in partnering with you to get the word out. And we look forward to just about 7 slides, so it's not a long presentation, just to share a little bit about our work. As many of you know, in 2018, Michigan voters passed Proposal 2, a ballot initiative for voters and not legislators to take responsibility for an independent process for redistricting, and created the MICRC. As you know, it's comprised of 13 randomly selected Michigan residents. So you have to look at this as a lottery. You know, they just put names in, you have to look at it as a lottery. And they selected 4 Democrats, 5 independents, and 4 Republicans. The MICRC is responsible for redistricting, the Michigan congressional, House, and Senate districts. In other words, we do not do counties and we do not do local governments. Only state and obviously Congress, senators, you already know, US senators are voted on as a state as a whole. To organize our work, we went through a strategic planning process, which I'm really happy about. And our mission is to lead Michigan's redistricting process to assure that Michigan's congressional, state Senate, and state House districts are drawn fairly in a citizen-led, transparent process, meeting constitutional mandates. So we want to make sure we do that. Our vision is to chart a positive course for elections based on fair maps for Michigan today and for the future. Very clear mission and vision. Our goals focus on the word FATE, F-A-T-E, the acronym: fairness, awareness, transparency, and engagement. These are our strategic goals. And then our core values focus on integrity, respect, transparency, and purposeful. So we really, really want to make sure about that. So when we talk about our goals in terms of fairness, commissioners will assure that lines are drawn in a fair, independent manner in live open meetings. Awareness: there will be multiple opportunities for residents of Michigan to learn about the redistricting process. Transparency: meetings of the commission, including public hearings, will be open meetings. We have always followed the Open Meetings Act. We can only make decisions in open meetings. Meeting agendas with supporting documents and other commissioner materials will be made available on the website michigan.gov/MICRC. When we refer to engagement, we want the members of the public to have multiple means and be encouraged to address the commission and provide public comment. We would love to have 10,000 distinct, I repeat, 10,000 distinct comments as it relates to the redistricting process. That is our goal. Core competencies. When we talk about core competencies, actions exemplify honesty and professionalism. Responsibilities and integrity are put above personal or political gain. Thoughtful and purpose dialogue and collegiality are fostered. Respect, tolerance, and equality are extended toward others. These are the core competencies that we have. But what are your critical success factors? Michigan citizens from across the state and with diverse backgrounds participate meaningfully in the redistricting process. The Constitution is upheld and always at the forefront. All actions are undertaken with a commitment to fairness. The code of conduct, which you can get off our website, policies and procedures are followed. Discussion and deliberations occur in open meetings with the utmost transparency. Commissioners, consultants, and staff members work in an impartial manner to instill public confidence in the integrity of the redistricting process. In conclusion, we want to hear from your members and the broader representation of the greater Highland area. So you can send questions, ideas to increase awareness and engagement, or provide public comments about Michigan's redistricting process to redistricting@michigan.gov or mail them to MICRC, P.O. Box 30318, Lansing, Michigan 48909. You can learn more about Michigan's new redistricting process or obtain more information about the upcoming public hearings. Please visit www.michigan.gov/MICRC. Tina, I want to thank you and your team so much for having me. If that's just a general overview about what we're doing, because I know you are providing the nuts and bolts of what's going to happen, and that is just great that people can hear it directly from you. But if there's any questions at this time, more than happy to take them. You guys have a great crowd here for this virtual meeting.
If you have a question, you can either put it in the chat or unmute yourself quickly. We'll just give a couple minutes here to see if we get anybody. Not seeing anything.
When will the drafts of the new maps be issued? Well, we cannot do any maps until we have 10 public hearings. And we're going to actually have 16 public hearings. And the public hearings close to the Highland area will take place Tuesday, June 29th in Muskegon at the Van Dyke Mortgage Convention Center. And then on Thursday, we'll be at the DeVos Place in Grand Rapids. The one on Tuesday starts at 6:00 p.m. And the one on Thursday will start at 5:00 p.m. with our regular meeting. And then we will have our public hearing at 6. So we cannot draft any maps whatsoever per the Constitution until we have our public hearings. So our public hearings are scheduled to end July 1st. We need to have a minimum of 10. So the map process will take place really during the summer. And then, our census data has been delayed. And so we're going to use some data, legacy data, and then we will verify that data once the census is released. And we expect to, have maps out this fall, this winter, and then we'll have another round of public hearings so people can speak toward the maps. Remind you, we're doing 3 maps: a congressional map, a state house map, and a state senate. The congressional map, we'll find out in about a week or so whether or not Michigan lost a seat. So will we go from 14 congressional districts to 13? For the Senate, there's 38 seats. And for the House, it's 110. Has the census results? No, they will not. They haven't been delivered. They're not scheduled to be delivered until September 30th of this year. Has the commissioner? Yes, the commissioners have already been chosen. That was done through a process by the Michigan Department of State that took place last year. If you go to our website, www.michigan.gov/MICRC, and if you scroll to the bottom, you can see the process that the Michigan Department of State did to select the commission. But once again, it was a randomly selected process, just like the lottery, to get 13 people, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 5 independents. Great questions. Thank you for asking.
Well, Edward, we thank you for your time. I will be going over some of that again, so they'll be getting some reminders about those important things that you just talked about. So let us thank you very much for joining our town hall. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tina. Best wishes.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll go back to screen sharing. We'll get back into the main part of the presentation. Here we go. Okay. All right, let's review. This presentation is going to cover 3 main points. We will be explaining what the redistricting is, including how it was done historically, how it will be done this year, and why it's important to voters. Next, we're going to explain the selection process, a little bit about that, that Edward talked about, and the role of the commission in drawing the maps. And then finally, we will define and give examples of communities of interest and tell you how and when the communities can testify before the commission. Okay, this is what we are striving for with the Michigan Independent Citizens Commission. Non-biased representatives of the voters in Michigan will draw the legislative districts, not politicians. So let's do a definition of redistricting. The lines for Michigan's U.S. congressional, state Senate, and state House maps, 3 separate sets of maps, are reviewed and redrawn every 10 years following the national census after the population shifts are identified and published. Redistricting is simply the process of drawing the lines for those congressional and legislative districts. How the district lines are drawn determines which voters reside in each congressional and legislative district. In Michigan, we have 14 at the moment congressional districts, 38 state Senate, and as he said, 110 Michigan House districts. All 3 sets have to be redrawn, which is a lot of lines to draw. Now, how are the maps drawn? Now that we know what needs to be done, let's cover the rules that govern how it's to be done and why it's important. The maps are drawn according to federal law first, and then state law, if any. So the federal laws that cover the redistricting obviously are number 1A, the Voting Rights Act here, and also the 14th Amendment, which is giving all citizens the right to vote. So those are really the only two federal laws that we have to worry about. In Michigan, until 2018, once you satisfied the federal requirements, there were no state rules on how to redistrict. So politicians manipulated the lines behind closed doors to give themselves and their political parties an unfair advantage. The name of this manipulation is gerrymandering. Now, let's just see how easy it is to gerrymander the lines. This will give us a hypothetical election district, first without any district lines, then with 3 ways to draw the various lines. The district is 40% purple voters and 60% green voters. The map at the left has no lines. The second one from the left shows districts that are compact but unfair. The lines are drawn vertically and the outcomes match party distribution, 2 purple seats and 3 green seats. The next one over has districts that are compact but unfair. The outcome is that the Greens win every single seat instead of 60% of them, just because the lines are horizontal rather than vertical. And this last one is showing you districts that are neither compact nor fair. So despite having overall fewer voters, purple wins the majority of the seats. That's the theory of how you can draw lines to your advantage. Let's show a real life example of a current Michigan congressional district. This is a good example of gerrymandering in Michigan, one of the worst districts in the country. This is Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence's seat. It has a 79% Democratic base, and over 80% of the population is African American. This odd shape does not follow city or township county lines. It does ensure that a large number of African American voters are packed into one congressional district instead of being spread over 2 or 3 other districts. And let's take a look at some of our other current maps. This map highlights the 2012 Michigan Senate district based on the 2000 census. Each color box is one Senate district. The Senate has 38 members. These lines will be redrawn for the 2022 election. And this map shows the current Michigan House districts. If you'll notice, we have some odd shapes around here as well. All these maps were the result of the old unfair process and will be redrawn this year. So now let's take a look at the new process. This process, of course, is being spearheaded by the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. In November 2018, as Edward mentioned, 61% of Michigan voters decided to end gerrymandering by approving Proposition 2, which was an amendment to the Michigan Constitution that moved the power to draw election district lines from the legislature and put it in the hands of the voters. The amendment created a body called the Independent Redistricting Commission, and it consists of 13 members and sets clear standards for how the lines should be drawn or should not be drawn. It also sets standards to ensure a transparent, impartial, and fair process. Edward spoke to us as a staff member of that commission. All right. This is what the Michigan Constitution requires of the commission. It must be transparent so that all the meetings are announced ahead of time, part of the Open Meetings Act on YouTube, and you can watch recordings of current and past meetings. They have to be impartial, and that's why you have 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 5 who not affiliated. And item C refers to the fairness criteria, and favoring neither party nor incumbent. So let's look a little more closely at the makeup of this commission. First, I'll describe the nature of the commission, who is eligible to serve, and a little bit about how they were selected. Here's an example of the commission and how it's balanced according to political affiliation. 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 5 independents. Note that there are 13 members, which makes a tie impossible. There are only 2 requirements for being on the commission. You had to be registered to vote in Michigan, and you had to submit an application. So once we had those applications, the government then, once they were received at the Secretary of State, there was a random draw weighted to reflect the demographic and geographic makeup of the state. And then it led to the final selection, again, random selection of the final 13 commissioners. Commissioners will spend a lot of time holding hearings and consulting with experts who will use specialized software and data from many sources, including census data, to draw the election district maps. The idea is to come up with a district map that A, meets the criteria in the constitutional amendment, and B, can be approved by a vote of the commission. Here's the requirements for that vote. Before a vote can take place, the map must have been tested using appropriate technology to meet the constitutional criteria and approved by a majority. That's 7 of the 13 members. And besides that, of those 13 members, they have to have at least 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and 2 independents who have to agree on the set of maps. Okay, now let's look at the criteria and rules for drawing the maps. The essence of all these rules is to prevent gerrymandering. So this is a listing of all 7 of the criteria which must be followed in order of priority. And the first criterion covers compliance with federal law, ensuring that A, they must be of equal population, and B, comply with the Voting Rights Act. The second is that they must be geographically contiguous. The third, and this is very important and a new concept for Michigan, districts must reflect the state's diverse population and communities of interest. Communities of interest may include populations that share cultural or historic characteristics or economic interests, and are the main criteria that we will focus on in the rest of the presentation. But more of that in the next section. Fourth criteria is no packing or cracking. In the 5th, you may not favor or disfavor an incumbent. And 6th, you shall consider, if possible, you should consider county, city, and township boundaries. And number 7, they should be reasonably compact. So now there must be public hearings, as Edward said, both before and after the proposed maps are drawn. The commission has scheduled 16 meetings before they draw the maps, more than the 10 that are required and shown here on this slide. All public hearings will be accessible and in-person and online. If it is at these public hearings that representatives from communities of interest will also be able to testify, present their maps of their communities to the commission. After the maps are adopted, the commission must publish a report explaining its decisions and the materials that they used. COVID-19 has led to delays, again, as we'll mention, in reporting the census data, moving that reporting from originally was supposed to be spring of 2021 to the fall of 2021. And because of this, the commission does not expect to have final maps before January actually of 2022, probably. So they and the Michigan Secretary of State have petitioned the Michigan Supreme Court for an extension of their November 1st map deadline, which is mandated in the Michigan Constitution. So now the league and the commission, the league intends to monitor meetings of the commission, testify coordinate with staff, and support the testimony of communities of interest, which are new concepts in Michigan. And that's why we're having this informational meeting. Now, Lena Del Real, our membership director, will cover the communities of interest in more depth. Lena?
Thank you, Tina. Yeah, so this is the part of the presentation we're going to talk about the COI'S, the communities of interest. There's a number of groups and organizations throughout Michigan that are working on this. Tina and others have been working tirelessly and trying to develop that list of the communities of interest. And just to give you an idea of what those are, and why they matter. So we're going to dig deep into these issues and explain why they are so important to drawing of election district lines in Michigan. What COI'S are: populations that share different aspects such as cultural, historical, or economic interests. I mean, it's just that. It's those common organizations or groups that share those characteristics. It can be a school district, it can be a group that you're a part of or that you're aware of. It's aligning them in order for them to have a stronger voice. How the MICRC has to define in order to help us define these COI'S. We don't look at other states because this is a very new concept to Michigan. We all know this is our first year with the MICR in place. And it is key to this new process that we're developing here. So this is what makes us very special as a state. You know, this is new to us, so we can kind of define it how we see fit. Some examples of these communities of interest, you could use cultural, ethnic, such as Hispanic, Latino populations, school districts, especially school districts that have similar issues. Those agricultural groups, dairy farmers, orchard growers, nursery farmers. We have a lot of those here in the Ottawa County area. Common interests such as nature, the watershed, the lakeshore. Again, very strong points here within our area. We all have heard a lot of this, especially over the last year and a half or so, as the weather has drastically changed our lakeshore here along the West Coast. Our Native American tribes, again, very impactful here in Michigan. And so those could develop their own COI'S, and as well as neighborhood associations. And when we look at all these types of communities of interest, it's easy to align multiple community of interest in one. You could take a Hispanic Latino population and group it with a school district, such as Holland Public, a very large population of Hispanic Latino students there. Even West Ottawa. If you want to make it a more broad COI, you could use persons of color. Then you could easily involve Holland Public as well as West Ottawa. So COI'S is just not one individual identifier. You can easily group multiples in there. An example of those types of COI'S, again, our example here is Maria. She's of Hispanic cultural heritage. She's a parent of a child at Holland Public School, and she's also a small business owner. She could easily define into a COI with those three different traits behind her. So don't be singular when you're thinking about a COI and how to align them or how to group them. It's a common interest, a common purpose in your mission, in your reason for being. So you can be more broad in that. It's not singular in nature at all. Communities of interest matter because they are the building blocks for legislative and congressional districts. Think about how creating fair and more effective representation, how that would help our different areas. Many of us have had these sort of discussions, and they seem to often come around the idea of our school systems. We like to think that they're very different. However, if you really look at their common interests, they're very similar. So thinking of those kind of things of why their interests matter comes into play. And elect reps who pay attention to their constituent interests. Why would you divide a school district in half in order to have representation? Wouldn't that school district have a louder voice and be more impactful if one political figure represented the entire district? It would give them more strength and a louder voice. And so this is why it's important to identify those COIs and get them on board at these hearings so that they're heard before any lines are drawn on those maps. I think I'm a member of a COI. So what do I do next? The COI that you think you might be a member of, think outside that box. And then you will meet with your community and decide what it is that you can align yourself with. And then you'll go further and agree on what are important issues for that community that COI represents. There are various softwares that you can use to help you draw what you think would be a fair map as far as the purpose of that COI that you are thinking of in your mind. You could always just grab a map and use a pencil and create those lines. That's what these hearings are for, is to hear your voice, particularly through the COIs. If we come through a COI, your voice is stronger. So that's what's important. And then you'll send your map in and or agree to testify at one of these commission hearings. There's two within our area, one at DeVos and one at Muskegon. We were happy to hear that the one in Grand Rapids was pushed back some ways. That allowed us to get some more time to reach out to people to that would be willing to give their testimony and work on their own maps and give reason why they believe that line should be drawn a particular way. And that's how you can get involved. Again, giving your testimony, agreeing to give your testimony. It doesn't have to be in person, it can be virtual. Everyone has their own safe areas at this point on what their comfort zone is. You can look at those public hearing schedules at the web address that's been provided, or you can contact your local league for more information. Tina and myself were very excited and eager to help anybody who's interested in developing their testimony, working on their maps. There's other people that have been working very hard on COIs in the West Michigan, Southwest Michigan, Northwest Michigan area. If we don't have answers, we can get them for you. Again, those dates for the commission hearings are May 13th in Kalamazoo, as well as Muskegon is June 29th, and then that one in Grand Rapids, July 1st. So if this is an area of interest for you, again, reach out to Tina or myself. We will work with you on developing your testimony, your maps, connecting you with the COIs that maybe you don't have a direct connection with yet. And so we can help you get those resources behind you so that we all have a stronger voice in this. Again, this is dealing with drawing those lines in order to have your representation. And that's it. Go ahead, Tina.
Okay, yes, thank you, everybody, for your attention. Just a reminder that a link is going to be sent of the recording of this town hall will be sent to everyone who registered to this in about a week. So if you wanted to share that, or if you know someone who wasn't able to join us this evening, that link will be available and sent to you in about a week. We'll now take questions that have been in the chat, and I'd like to introduce Barb Ferguson, who will now read those questions to us.
We actually only have one question so far.
Okay.
So if there are other questions, go ahead and type them into the chat.
Yep.
Ann Weller is asking, will any of the proposed GOP election bills be at odds with the goals of the Redistricting Commission?
If she's talking about the recent ones that were submitted to the committees in the Senate, those are the kind of voting rights bills. Probably, mostly not, because Prop 2 was submitted as a constitutional amendment, which means it's much more difficult to change, and you can't just legislatively change it. You would have to change the Constitution, which is a much more difficult process. So as far as I know, and if Mr. Woods is still here, he might be able to answer that as well. But to my knowledge, those bills are just legislative, so they cannot touch a constitutional amendment.
Edward is still here, so if he wants to unmute and respond.
I am not moving fast enough, so please forgive me. That's why you couldn't see it. But to be honest with you, Tina answered the question masterfully. The Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission is the only body that is responsible for the maps. So what's happening with voting has no impact on us whatsoever. So kudos to Tina for her acumen in addressing that question, and happy to affirm her.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay, Marilyn has a question. What possible communities of interest have been talked about and or worked on already within the Holland, West Michigan area? Have any
Tina,
been
I'll take that question. So we have been talking virtually, email, in person, sort of developing that list of possible community of interests within our area. Sometimes it's harder because our area is defined as, it could be the city of Holland, it could be Ottawa County, it could be West Michigan. So just developing that, we were given sort of a spreadsheet. I think, in fact, it was a spreadsheet of community of interests that some students out of, I believe, the University of Michigan that was working on with this. And we noticed right away that, like, the eastern part of the state was very well represented. And so just myself eyeballing that list, I'm like, well, what about, you know, this organization and that organization? I was then kind of corralled in and said, that's what our job is, to add those. And I said, oh, okay, so now I know what, you know, it helped me realize that purpose. And so we all have used whatever connections we have for different communities of interest, reached out to them, whether it's in person or through an email, asking these different organizations if they would like to, or groups or whatever they are, if they would like to provide testimony, if they would like to form a coalition, develop that community of interest within their organization. Marilyn, if there's any particular groups that you could think of, we have reached out to religious sects, we've reached out to educational, cultural, whatever those are those people that have been working on this together, whatever connections we had or thoughts that came to our mind. But we, the collective group, are always willing to listen to somebody else, and if they have a connection to some of these. We may have already reached out to some of these groups that you might have in your mind without a response, but maybe you have a closer connection and maybe we need your weight behind that. So the list is vast on who we reached out to, but again, if you have particular ones, and I feel like that might be why you asked that question, please reach out to Tina or myself.
Paula is asking, is there a computer program that will help connect people to find their communities of interest, or is it more of a manual record process? Alina, do you want
to my knowledge, it's more of a manual. It's like a spreadsheet format. Literally, it's been a while since I looked at it, but it was a spreadsheet, right, Tina? Yeah.
Yes, it was, and it's really just, we have the list. To be honest, brutally honest, I haven't heard of anybody that's scheduled their testimony yet. So I'm not sure we've gotten too many takers, but we have certainly put out the offer to a number of groups and tried to get them interested.
Bridget has another question related to communities of interest. Can you help us understand how the communities of interest are impacted or figure into the districts? And maybe do that through an example.
Tina, do you want to take that or?
Okay, yeah, I can take that. Right. It is kind of confusing at first, but we did have the slide of the woman that Maria that had like at least 3 different communities of interest that she was part of. And because most of these districts, especially the Senate and the US congressional, are pretty big districts, any one particular community of interest would not encompass the entire congressional district. But if you want to make sure that your individual group does not get separated, that would be important for them to know. So you don't want a line drawn across your group. And more than likely what's going to happen is they will layer groups that have similar interest, which maybe you could take a Hispanic cultural group and you might want to take an agricultural workers group or something like that and say, we want to be joined with these groups because our interests are similar and we would like to all be in at least like a state Senate district or maybe even a state house, depending on how big all these groups, because I think the smallest district there is the House districts, and they even have like 77,000 people in them. So, I mean, it's a pretty good size number that you get in each of these groups. So I hope that explains it a little bit more.
Lena, maybe you can take this one. How many speakers on a community of interest are you seeking to provide testimony?
I don't think, I think there's a time limit on the actual hearing, but I don't think there's a time limit yet on the testimony that can be provided. I don't know if Tina or Mr. Woods has a time limit, but I would see it as if I'm representing a particular group, say I'm representing the Holland Museum, since they are so graciously hosting us this evening. I would be that one person that speaks on behalf of the museum as the community of interest of the historical or arts or whatever it might be. So do we know, is there a time limit on the testimony that a COI could provide?
We have not yet set the process for group testimony. We do know that there's an interest in that. And so we haven't done it. Today, when we met, we did talk about the public comment process. And at this time, public comments is up to 2 minutes. But depending on how many people come, that time could be adjusted. But at this time, it is up to 2 minutes. We're working on sign-in procedures at these public hearings. You can speak virtually, or you can speak in person. And so they're trying to get the times. Right now, the tentative time is noon if you want to sign up virtually. And if you're at the public hearing, 8:00 p.m. to sign at the desk. And then we'll make sure, and we'll be there as long as it takes to hear everyone make their public comment. We did schedule 6 to 9, but all the venues know that we will be there to make sure everyone hears, gets an opportunity to speak before the commission. Hopefully that is helpful, but at this time, this is the discussion that is taking place. Once the rules are finalized, they'll be posted on our website and you'll be able to access that information. And our goal is to have that done probably next week, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
Is next week, so thank you.
And Ann Weller has a comment. Working with the parameters of being contiguous, similar population size, and communities of interest seems like it will be really challenging. Lena, you want to take that one?
I want to go back to the idea that this is new space for us. So I think we should look at that as a blessing, not a challenge. We can sort of define it more since this is our first go around. I see the point in that, but we have to be optimistic and look at the positives of this experience.
Looks like those are the questions that we have so far. So from here, people should contact Tina or Lena if they are interested in continuing to look at communities of interest. And the League of Women Voters Holland website has links to all of this information as well. Tina, you want to finish up?
Okay, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us and taking time out to learn about this very important topic, this new thing for Michigan, which is the Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, and for learning how you, really all of us are members of some kind of a community of interest, and how we can get together with them and have a meeting and decide what's important to us. And if it's important enough to us to draw our own map, I hope that we will actually testify before the commission and submit some maps. So I think I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Again, thank the Holland Museum for partnering with us, and Mr. Woods for joining us from the commission today. And I think we'll leave the meeting today, and thank you very much then. Good night.
You know, if I could just add something real quick on that.
Sure, go ahead.
If we do have links or website information on map drawing virtually, if anyone is interested. Again,
Right.
reach out to Tina or I found it very useful. Again, a paper and pencil works as well.
Well, it does. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Good evening.